Hey folks, it's James, and in this week, part 2 of my UCLA workshop, we're going to take a look at Morpholio Trace. So if you're an architect or designer wondering which is the best app for you, fasten your seatbelt, grab your iPad, download the Morpholio file I made for this video in the link below, and get ready to learn everything about Morpholio Trace that an architect or designer needs to know. So let's go with the same philosophy. Let's say that you're new to Morpholio and you're just trying to figure out how to get started with the least hassle, okay? And I think that I like to go back to that metaphor of the pencils, pens, and paintbrushes in your top drawer, either when you were growing up as a child or, in my case, 5 short years ago. I think there's something still back there. So I'm going to go in Morpholio. I'm just going to go ahead and add a project in the gallery, and I'm going to hit the plus sign, okay? And I'm just going to use a screen size again to keep it simple. And up that comes. So the big difference in Morpholio is that I think you can see this. The interface is bigger, and it's something called, there's a word, a very fancy word, it's called skeuomorphic. And what it means is that when a digital product sort of brings the conventions of analog drawing over to the digital world, so this is very much set up the way that you would set up a drafting board. And part of that is because this is a smaller company and they were so successful and so fast to get to this market that this was back in the day when app designers were still designing things somewhat skeuomorphically. So it's a little less modern, you might say, but you know, we're gonna make sure you guys get used to it. So the first subject that comes up is brushes, because we've got a canvas, but how are we going to draw on this, okay? So over here is the so-called brush menu. And I don't think I can move this up and down now. So you see there's usually, I believe it's 7 choices. And this really does come down to the brushes that are in your drawer. And if you tap on, you don't even have to hold, just tap it twice, and up come the choices for your brushes. So what I tend to do in a very simplistic way is I'll just pick the dumbest, from the dumbest to the most sophisticated, and I'll make sure that that's all set up. So in this case, the pencil is activated and is going to be my brush number 1. But I also have the choice of setting the size of it. And this is where it can get a little confusing. So just randomly pick any size, and I should also say that immediately above the brush is the color that you're going to pick on. So whereas in in Procreate, we had our color dot over here. In Morpholio, it's right here. So white is not going to show up on white, so I'm going to tap that. And I can go to, if you don't have anything already here, this is the most recent colors that you've used end up here. And I'll hit the top back arrow. And so I'll go ahead and pick a red, but if you don't see any colors there, go ahead and tap the color wheel. And there'll be some preloaded palettes that Morpholio provides. And I'll pick the red here, and so whatever you end up picking preloads into that point. And now I can just tap on the screen for that to go away. So now my pencil, whenever that pencil is highlighted, I know that the color is going to be red, and the size of the pencil is going to be 6.4 somethings. I have no idea what. I think it might be millimeters, but it's the same thing. You can sort of like draw very lightly. And I'll go slow enough that I think you'll all be drawing along with me. You can draw lightly, or you can draw fatter, press harder and get a bigger line. So it's very much like a real pencil. The one thing is that I'll point out differences as we go. I'll use 2 fingers to go back with any luck. Sometimes it doesn't work. Maybe my fingers have got something on them, or I'll go back. Instead, I can go back to this back arrow here, okay? And I can take those off one at a time. And I wanted to show you that when I came to Morpholio after Procreate, so the first time I did something like this and said, okay, give me a straight line, and I just waited and waited and waited, and it's like, wait, what? So Morpholio does not have that same feature. You'll see later they don't really need it because they have this whole scale system. Now I'm hitting with 2 fingers and I'm not having any success, so I'm going to go and undo that with the back arrow. So then what I do, so I've got my pencil, and in some situations, I'm going to tap the next brush down. And remember, if I tap twice, these choices will come up. And so I generally load it up with my, well, I think of this as my felt tip pen. Like years ago, they had, I don't know if they still have them, but razor point pens, which I loved. And so I figure that should be the next pencil that I place into the next brush. And then if I come down one more time, so I'm down in pencil slot number 3, and you get the idea. You have your opportunity to pick both the pencil and the color, believe it or not, and the size of the pencil. So in this case, I'm using this. This goes up next to, I forget what they call them, but it's like bigger than like a permanent marker, a black marker. I forget the brand, but so that's another option. And you can see it's already getting bigger. I got to undo that mark. And this time I'm going to switch to, let's say I'm going to switch to a black this time to make the point. And so that marker, now that's not going to be useful to me. That's just too fat. So I'll undo that over here, and I'll move this. And I find this a little more challenging than, Procreate, you can see the size of it when you move the adjustment slider. But here you kind of have to get used to it. Now that looks like the markers that I'm used to in terms of, I might even go thicker for that very strong black outline marker that I have. I'm wondering if I have one of my right next door to us. Yeah, here it is. Nice thing about working at home. But here's the marker I'm talking about. Some of you may have seen. And, you can even literally be like, try and make it the same size as because that's what size it'll print out once it prints out. So that's why I like to make it as similar as possible to the pencils in my top drawer. And then I go from there, I go to, I'm down at the 4th slot now. I'll double tap. And now I'm going to what they call the chisel nib marker. And then my 5th one is sort of a watercolor brush. And this one's a little more challenging. I've got it set at a huge number there, which isn't very useful. And there's way too small there. And so again, this is, remember your assignment is really play, have fun with this. I'm going to make this a darker black so we can see. So I'll tap on the palette up there. And I'll go to a black, or even a red, I guess. And now I've got the red loaded in at the top of the brush menu there. And that will stay assigned to this brush, which is a nice feature. And so again, I'm trying to figure out the right size for this to do my work. And here I go. So this is quite a thing. I haven't really found the right use for this, but I've seen people that do love to use this feature. And notice that if I go over again, it gets darker. So it's not exactly like a watercolor brush in that, a watercolor brush, you can pre-wet the area and have all the color push out to it, but it's a pretty neat imitation. And you can see it's spreading in real time as we do this. It's kind of has a life of its own, although it's very programmed in that way. And also another big difference here. Notice that this is no longer working for me to do a 2-finger pinch. What I have to do instead in Morpholio, and again, a lot of information very quickly, I realize, but we'll really get this in our bones in the coming weeks. But with Morpholio, to return to the full size, you have to tap the layer. And that's all it takes. You tap the layer. So no matter where you are, as long as you tap that layer just once, it'll come back to that point. All right, so there's one more very interesting brush I want to tell you about. And that is, I'm going to go ahead and tap the back arrow here to get rid of all this stuff. Now this is, in Procreate we did what I was calling the select and fill operation, where we'd create a shape, and that would become bounded by the marching ants. And then we would throw in a color or fill it with a color. And this is the closest approximation that Morpholio has, and it's called the paint roller brush. And the paint roller brush is, I think, for this purpose, I'm going to just very quickly draft up a rectangle for you guys. So you don't have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and draft up a rectangle. I'm going to activate the ruler. Now, whenever that ruler's, and again, sorry, I'm going fast, but whenever that ruler's on screen, wherever you draw will be limited to 0 and 90. So you don't have to have that ruler right where you're drawing. You can sort of just have it present on the screen. So I'll go ahead and draw a box, a wall similar to what we drew in Procreate. And there it is on its own layer. And now I'm going to add a layer here. Okay, and you can see it just showed up there. And we'll get into the layers menu in a moment, but I want to just for now show you that there are boxes on the lower layer, and some strange new event is going to occur on this layer. And now I'm going to go back to that paint roller brush and show you how how it compares to what we're calling this select and fill operation. So I'll pick a blue-gray here, and everything's set up, and now I'm going to put the pencil tip down and start drawing. Now nothing seems to be happening. I'm holding my tip down, but watch what happens as I come down here. And then watch what happens as I come over here. And then watch what happens as I release. Okay? So now we've got, so basically what this thing is doing, and it's fascinating. To me, it's like a silk screening in real time. And I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to do it, now I'm going to do it in this lighter violet color so you can see it better. But the sort of unusual thing that you have to get rid of is you have to hold the pencil down, and you also have to get over the idea that I can't go point to point. I have to literally bring it along freehand, and I'm making the effort to leave it sort of off the line deliberately. But the last operation, wherever you drag it, it does snap straight. So that line at least will be straight. And now I can go back in and actually fill this in again. Okay, so I'm not left with, the first effort no matter what. I can finish that up again. Okay. Now, and then within that, now you can see obviously we've covered up the black line, and that's where the blending modes come in, because Morpholio also has blending modes. And in the layer drop-down menu, you can tap these three dots. Next, I'll do it again. Let's say that we could be in the drawing menu first, but let's make sure we're in this menu. To make sure you're in the layer you think you're on, you need to tap twice, okay? And you'll see what happens when I do that. It becomes highlighted. So now I know that whatever I do is going to be in this layer. If I tap twice on that ink drawing lever, it'll be there, but I'll tap twice on this. And now I'll go into the three dots, and we can talk about all these options. And one of the options is, well, starting from the top, we have what's called the paper opacity, and that is just the layer of tracing paper. I'm going to show you this in a better way, but we'll come back to that. We have the drawing opacity, which is the actual thing that you do on the layer, and that's that violet that we've used, that gray violet. And then you have the blending modes. So if we use the blending mode, and it's just like Procreate, it has fewer options, but it still has a multiply option. So if I tap multiply, watch what happens to this color. There goes back the drawing underneath. Oops, I'm going to hit that again. Tap multiply. And I forgot that in Morpholio, you have to, after you activate it or ask it to do something, you have to hit the check button so that it knows that, yeah, I really want that, okay? So there you go. So we've overcome that problem in the same way, showing the multiply blend modes in these different things. So to go back to this, so I've got 6 brushes activated, and the final one is the eraser. And the eraser is a single, there's only one kind of eraser that's available, and but that'll still be useful to you. In Procreate, you can shape the eraser and use that for artistic purposes, but here you've got to go ahead and just pick a size, and it's basically a circle, like on the back of a number 2 Ticonderoga pencil, but you can change the size. And you can also, if those of you that are artistically inclined, you can also change the opacity of either the brushes or the eraser, and you can see that makes a difference. But it's cumulative, so you could keep doing that. So if you wanted to just soften something that you've done, you could sort of use that technique. But it's also very finite. It's like there's no, it doesn't matter how light. Here I'm touching very lightly. I'm barely holding the pen. You can see that. And here I'm going to really bear down. So it doesn't have that subtlety. It doesn't have that subtlety because it's not a painting program, and Procreate is a painting program. But this is very much targeted towards designers that have work to do and plans to draft and that kind of thing. So that is the brushes. Now, we've talked a little bit about colors. Let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this layer over in the layer menu. I'm just going to hit that eyeball. And let's look again. Let's go back to one of these. Let's go back to the pencil and just make sure we've hit everything in terms of the colors. So we already know that. Now, notice that whatever you last did in that brush, in that pencil or pen or marker, that color that you last used is also still present. And I guess you guys can see that. I'll make that up. Now, that's very useful. That doesn't happen in Procreate, and that can be very useful. So here's that heather that we used in the paint roller. So that's one important aspect about color. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. They have the same kind of ideas. There's two ways to look at it. This is the so-called palette drawer mode, highlighted in yellow. And you can add palettes to Morpholio. And in fact, in both of these programs, I think you can import images. But if you can't, there's a way to, we didn't go over the options for importing palettes into Procreate, but if I go in Morpholio, if I tap the color wheel, then I've got that same option. I don't have the wheel option, but I can change the hue down here. And so let's say I'm trying to put together a palette for my upcoming job. I'm going to go to colors. I can actually program them from Pantone or something in this way. But if I want to just do it intuitively, let's say I need a green for the interior planting, then I can go, after that's selected, I can notice that it's over here. Whatever I select is going to be, well, it actually isn't changing in real time. But if I go back now to the palette, then I can tap in this new palette. Remember, we tapped the plus sign to get a new palette to come up. And I can tap in here, and that green that we selected will show up. So if I am putting together a palette for a very important job, I can come in here. Let's say we need a interesting tan. And here again, this is the lower palette is showing us what's being changed. And I can find that wood color that I need. And then as a shortcut, I can just come down here to this palette that it's going to assemble for me and just tap here. And now I've got my second color. And so notice how not only are these colors compiling themselves in this new untitled palette, but they're also compiling themselves in the preview window over here. So just to make the point one more time, let's go to a completely different color. And it's sort of a light blue and aquamarine. And I'll tap that here. And watch what happens here when I tap this here. Boom, it shows up there. So that's how you build up a palette in Morpholio. And I'll tap on the screen for all of that to go away. And now all of my pens and brushes have that at their disposal. But I can also at any time go back in and build up a new palette. I can go back to my palette drawer of all my classic palettes that have been working for me in different jobs. And you can imagine these having different names, the Spielberg job, and on the Academy Awards jobs. So that's all there. It's not going to forget that. It's all there available for you. So that's our palettes. And then let's go back and just look at starting a job. Let's do the drawing to scale part of this Morpholio. And this is Morpholio's great strength. So I'm going to tap out of where we are. I'll go back to this gallery. I'm going to ignore this. And now I'm going to, let's say you really got to get down to work and you're going to use the same 11 by 17 philosophy. And you need to come up with a floor plan and then draft it up and then maybe add some colors. But more importantly, you need to work to scale so that you're sure that all of your ideas are working. So to do that, we're going to hit the plus button. And what happens with Morpholio is you get all these options. We've already talked about the blank screen option where we went immediately to it's sort of what I call the sketchbook option. It'll just immediately give you an iPad screen. But you're probably going to most often use something called the custom palette or the custom canvas. So I'm going to tap the custom icon, and that's not going to be the end of it because it's going to keep giving me these choices, and I promise you'll get good at these. But now, even though it seems redundant because we already saw a blank, we're going to say yes. When this comes up, make it a blank, and now it's going to say, okay, well, what size? And here's that screen option that we had, and the previous blank option was just a shortcut to get to there. But now we can pick these common paper sizes, and they come in both metric and imperial sizes. So you've got your A0s through your A4s here, and then you've got your tabloid. Now we're going to use that 11 by 17 tabloid again. So I'll tap that. And now the next step, so there are all these decisions you're going through, but they're all going to save you time later. The next step is, all right, what scale are you going to draw in? And so we're like, well, we're going to stay in 1/8 scale. So I find 1/8 scale here, and I tap on that. And now it's going to do its magic and launch itself. And sure enough, there is a 1/8 scale drawing. So what this means is that when I print this out, now I'm going to go back and tap this scale icon, okay? And this is the heart and soul of Morpholio. I'm going to tap this scale icon, and up it comes. Now it's not a conventional scale, in that I don't see, when you conventional 1/8 inch scale, you'll see 8 feet, 16 feet, 24 feet, that kind of thing. But this is their solution to this is to just make a single scale that serves both imperial and metric purposes. So it's only going to be numerical. It's never going to give you clues that you're used to with the other kinds of scales. And notice how, and I am throwing a lot at you, but you're all very clever. So I'm going to use 4 fingers to make all of this interface go away, because I want to make this as clear to you as possible. And this happens in both programs. So if I tap with 4 fingers, all of that interface goes away. It leaves a little icon up here, and I can bring it all back at a moment's notice. But I'm going to make it go away again, and I can also just use the 4 fingers again to do that, okay? So let's make it go away, 4 fingers. And what I want you to do is notice this what we would call the drop shadow that's around this document. So there, shrunken on our screen, is an actual 17 by 11 piece of paper, the so-called tabloid size. And superimposed on top of it is a scale which will change as we shrink that page. So you'll see the scale shrink, but that's because it's maintaining the relative size and it's maintaining its scale. So let's put this to use more. And let's say that you've been tasked with drawing up, it's your new job at an interior design place, and they've asked you to draw up a 20-foot, well, let's make it bigger. Let's make it a 90-foot by 50-foot nightclub. And you're going to start with just a plain rectangle. So we can go back to our pencil, and let's change the color to black. And I don't have it here in my new menu, so I'm going to go back, a little review for you. I'm going to go back to the palette, and I'm going to find that Morpholio Accelerator palette, and I'm going to tap black. You won't have that, by the way. That's something I made for one of my courses that I make. But you can pick any black or any dark color. And now I'm going to tap on the screen, and then I'm going to start drawing at the 0 mark. And I'll be very crude about it. And then my client wanted me to, or my boss wanted me to draw at 90 feet, right? 90 feet by 50 feet. So I'll start here, and notice I was going to start drawing on the scale, but it started to move the scale with me. So instead I'll move a little bit away from the scale, and I'll put a line. Now, oddly enough, I can come back over the scale. That's no problem. So there's my 90, and now I can rotate this. I think I can tap on the scale. Yeah, if you tap on the scale twice, you can move it 90 degrees at a time, which is very helpful. So I'll go to the 90, and now I want to find that 50-foot dimension. So here's 0 again, and here's 30, 35, 40, 45, 50 here. So I'm going to be 50 there, and 0 here, okay? Now the other thing I can do, if I want to, is that the scale can act as a guide for me. So let's say I'm gonna double tap the ruler to make it horizontal again. I'm going to tap and take it up here. And let's say that I know that this room is going to be divided in 2. Just for a quick demonstration, I can move that ruler right to the point, right to the halfway point, and then I can use the ruler as a straight edge. So I think this is another big thing that people love about Portfolio, or about Morpholio, is that this is what I mean by the skeuomorphic. It's similar to the analog world in that in the old days we used to draw along our triangles in our rulers. So this can be very comforting to people. But once again, notice that as I make this bigger, that scale will stretch. The scale won't stay on the line where I want it to stay, but it'll just change with the scale of the drawing. So this is the heart and soul of Morpholio. And there's one other scale drawing aspect I'd like to share with you. Let's see, what's a better way to demonstrate this? I'm going to turn this off. Okay, so go over to your layers menu. If you've been drawing along, go to your layers menu and tap the eyeball icon on this layer. And go ahead and tap the ruler. Notice how it's highlighted whenever the ruler's on. And I'll use 2 fingers to sort of bring all this back into view. But when the super ruler, what they call the super ruler, is visible, that icon is on. All I have to do is tap it, and it goes away. Now, I'm going to bring in a drawing, because what we've basically covered is there's 2 ways to draw to scale in all of these apps. And one is what we call proactive, which was what we've just done. So by drawing proactively, you're setting up ahead of time. You're setting up the proper scale, the proper grid, and the proper ruler, and then you can just begin working directly to all that. And so part of that is also, if we go now to that wrench, there's this dialog box that comes up, scale, set the scale, units, and here is something called set the grid, okay? And so this is a wonderful feature again, because I want to show you one more aspect about this. First of all, you can activate show the grid, which is probably your best first move, because now you can evaluate that grid and see if it's helpful or not, okay? And so this grid is very chunky for most people. That's because the grid is occurring. If I go back to the project setup wrench, and I go back to set the grid, okay, these grids are occurring right here, and I'll make this, it's still big, that's good. So you can see here, this is the dialog box where you tell Morpholio how big you want the grid to be. So I generally use something like 2 feet for this grid, because it's a finer grain grid and allows me to figure out, what a 3-foot chair, I can draw a 3-foot chair much better when I have a 2-foot grid than an 8-foot grid. So I'll tap on the 8-foot here, and I'll change it to 2, and then I'll press the check arrow. Here again, there's always checks in Morpholio, and there's that grid. And there is the drop shadow around the actual document. So the actual document is only coming to here, but watch the grid, as I expand this, watch the grid get bigger, okay? So that's another great way. I'm going to hit the checkbox to finally zero out and come back here, okay? And now that grid, once again, is coordinated with the Morpholio scale ruler. So I'll double tap twice to bring the 0 back to this side. And remember how we made that grid 2 feet? So now you can see that sure enough, it's all lining up, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, okay? So why did I bring all that up? That's a rhetorical question. I'm bringing that all up because you have the option to get started right away with the grid. We're calling that the proactive drawing to scale strategy. Now, there is another strategy, and I'm going to launch a new sheet for that. And this is called the retroactive drawing to scale, which is probably more typical of what you'll be doing. So in this case, I'm not worried about you guys having this already. I just want to show you this, and you can lay your pencils down. There are situations where you are going to import a plan into Morpholio. So somebody will say, hey, can you get started on that Adams residence job? And your first move is going to be to import an image of that drawing, okay? And I'll turn this off, and this is to our conversation about layers. Up here at the top of the layer menu is this thing called the icon, the image icon. And that allows me to add an image from my library or my camera or my cloud drives. And I'm going to go into the cloud drives in this time because I've already stored the Adams residence in my iCloud drive, okay? And it may be that I have to use a different one. But this is a very common thing that you guys will be faced with if you're going to be using your iPads consistently. If I can, I want to use it. So instead I'm going to go up to, let's go to this plan. I think this will work. Okay, here's a good example. So in comes that plan. And that plan's not going to have any scale. It may have dimensions on it, but it won't be to scale. It's just going to be an image that came in because it happened to be so many pixels wide, okay? But your boss doesn't want to hear about that. Your boss says, I want you to get started on this job. So the good news is that it has some dimensions, and at some point this drawing was scaled. So I'm going to make it as big as possible on this drawing so I can work as big as possible. And now I am going to hit the check mark, okay? So now you can see at the top of my layer stack, I have successfully added this plan. And the next logical step would be to go to the top of the layer stack again and hit a blank page, and up that comes, and then just start designing over it, right? Like, oh, well, I'm going to do this here, and then you can go this, and I'm moving fast here, I apologize, but I can go to these 3 dots again. This is the new layer that I've added. I can go to these 3 dots and tap them, and I can increase the opacity of the tracing paper and see how that's going to be to your taste. And in the old days, we used to use tracing paper. We'd stretch it out, and we would sort of like fluff up one end of it, and you would see less when the air got under it and more when the air didn't get under it. And so that's basically what this is. You can go all the way down to 0, but you can also go there. So this is your goal by bringing this plan in. It's because you want to design over it. But there's a very important step that we left out, and that is we want to design to scale. And this is why I call this retroactive scale. And here's where the fun begins. So I'm going to pick one of the biggest dimensions I can find on this plan, because that'll ensure that it's statistically the most accurate. I've chosen the largest string of dimensions, and so the errors will be smaller if there are any. And now I'm going to go back to that wonderful wrench menu we talked about, and they call it the project setup. And I am going to go to set scale, okay? Now when we proactively scaled, we already came in at scale. The paper came in at scale and we started working. Here we brought in an image, and now we're going to set the scale of this image. So I'm going to tap set the scale, and that brings up, and I hope you can see them. Yeah, we can see them. That brings up these calipers. And what you're going to do is stretch these calipers to these lines, okay? So I've got it one on either end, and I'm not going to drive myself crazy by saying, "Oh, am I really?" Believe me, it's tempting. Am I really in the middle of that? You sort of have to develop this kind of thick skin and say, like, no big deal. So I've got the calipers roughly in the middle of these very fuzzy pixelated dimension lines, and now I'm going to add the dimension that I see here up here in the dialog box. So I'm going to go 20, and then I'm going to tap in the inches box, and I'm going to put in the 9 inches, okay? And I'm not done there. I wish I was, but I'm not done there because I have to remember to always come down to the green check mark, okay? So now I go to my check mark, and you can see, it's hard to see, but a little dialog box showed up that says scale registered. And now we can prove that because we can order up that super ruler. And as I stretch this across, you'll see that sure enough, it is right there. I want to make this big so you can see it. So I'm going to hit the 4 fingers and make the interface go away. And so if I take 0 over here to that point in that hash mark, well, that's funny. It's actually too big. So I'm going to take take the scale ruler to 0 in this end, and sure enough, over here, 20 plus 3, 6, 9, 29 inches. So that is what we call retroactively scaling. Okay. So far in Morpholio, we have covered the brushes. We've sort of skipped over. We've covered colors. We've sort of skipped over layers and shown just enough, and we've talked about drawing to scale. And we've talked about importing images. Now, there's one other very important thing that I want to point out about importing an image, which is that, and let's say that I want to do a rendering, and I know I'm going to use images from a magazine that I'm going to sort of bring into the rendering and shrink them in size and edit them and get rid of the white space behind them, okay? So all of that, very possible in Procreate. So I'm going to come over here to the top of my layers menu, and I'm going to touch the add an image icon. And I'm going to go to iCloud drives because that's usually where I keep these things. And now I am going to go to a whole folder full of goodies. Okay, let's pick this cork table, okay? So I'm going to bring in that cork table. And now I want to, so first of all, I'll say, yeah, I don't care what the size is. I'm going to shrink it later. I'm going to hit the check mark, okay? And it's all set up and ready to go. So there it is on its own layer. I tap the eyeball, and I'm good to go. And now I'm so excited, I'm going to pick the selection tool. And I am going to try and edit this image, but I'm a little bit frustrated because I see scale, and I'm play acting for you guys. I see scale in place, so that's going to let me move it around again or make it bigger or smaller again, but I don't see an option to select it anywhere, and that's because basically I can't trace anything around this and select it and then get rid of the thing that I've traced around. And so this limits its ability to be a rendering program. And just as significantly, I can't really, and I'll cancel out of that, I can't really select this plan. So if I wanted to move parts of this plan around, if I wanted to grab, say, that family room and rearrange it and put it over here and test how that would work, I can't do that either, okay? So that's the last important point I wanted to make about drawing to scale in Morpholio. Don't forget to dive deeper on anything you've learned in these videos. Check out the online courses I offer in the description below. To see the next video or the first one in this series, click here, and I'll see you in the next video.